Support for this podcast comes from Frito-Lay and the 2023 Snack Bracket Championship. The Frito-Lay Snack-a Challenge is underway, and fans are voting on their favorite snacks to crown champion. We're talking about primetime matchups between the best 64 snacks in the land. Will Ruffles Ridges reign supreme? Can Doritos defend their dynasty? Or will Smart Food use their smarts for a surprise upset? Only you can decide. Get in on all the action for a chance to win up to $1,000 or a year's worth of snacks. Let your snacks be heard. Just go to fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com to vote and enter for a chance to win. No purchase necessary. Sweepstakes ends April 3rd, 2023. Void where prohibited. Year's worth of snacks awarded in the form of 52 coupons, each good for one bag of chips. See official rules at fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com.
This is the Black Gold Banneret Podcast. Now, here are your hosts, Jeff Sharon, Eric Lopez, and Brian Murphy.
Welcome to the show, Jeff Sharon, Eric Lopez, Brian Murphy, and joining us, Andrew Glukov, on this final Black and Gold Banneret Podcast of the year 2020. Thank goodness this year is finally coming to an end. You know what? 2021 is going to be, it's probably going to get off to a slow start, guys, but at least we're through this one. I mean, it's been a rough year, and obviously not nearly as rough for us as it has been for many people out there. Obviously, I don't want to make light of that, but everyone can. I think we're all going to remember this as the year that wasn't. I think, don't you agree?
Oh, totally. Yeah, it's a historic, uncanny, weird, sad, different year, and we all had to adjust to so many different things. But just talking athletically, it was a year in which so many things changed. It took us a long time to sort of get our bearings around it, but we are going to see the end of it and hope for better things in 2021. It may not be the best year ever, but it will be a better year.
I feel like that 1 week in March was like a week ago, and like the rest of the week is just the rest of the year has just been that fast. But anyway, we'll recap 2020 as best we can. Try and take away some positives of it in our second segment. But in our first segment, we're going to talk about men's and women's basketball. Just kind of catch you up on things. So we're recording this, of course, Wednesday, December 30th, and 10:23 p.m. At this time right now, I guess we would be finishing up post-game from UCF against Tulane, but that game got postponed literally 3 hours before tip-off due to officially what is being called COVID-19 related issues. We've had no reports of anybody testing positive for either team, thank goodness. So we're not really sure what the total deal is with that, but all we know is that UCF is coming off of that rather tight loss to Houston by 9 points at home the day after Christmas, and a game which they performed pretty well, Murph. But now we won't see UCF again until the new year, January 2nd, this coming Saturday against USF. So I wanted to go back just real quick and look back at that Houston game because I think that count me as one of the people who thought, shoot, if we have a good performance in this game, win or lose, I'll be pretty happy. But there we were in the second half with a lead, and I think you talked to Coach Dawkins post game, Brian, and he was saying that are there positive takeaways from it? Yeah, but I think that the players are a little bit ticked about this, but I think that's actually okay because, to be honest with you, there were quite a few positives to take away from this game, weren't there?
Absolutely. I think, Johnny Dawkins is never going to get like moral victories out of anything, certainly not right after the fact of a loss. Like, he's just not going to give you that satisfaction of like, well, we did this, we did that. Like that, those things will come, those things are there, but in the aftermath and in the fog of a loss, any loss, there's always going to just be disappointment. But I think he also does understand that this team was right there with the number 6 team in the country, now the number 5 team in the country, but more on that in 1 second. They were right there with Houston with 2 minutes to play, down by 4. And I thought, like we said on the night shift after the game, I wouldn't categorize it that they played well, but I would say that they played hard. And I thought their defense was good. They really forced Houston in some tough offensive possessions for much of the first half, really. It was a defensive battle. Ultimately, it comes down to two things. One, UCF makes too many turnovers, too many mistakes with the ball. And secondly, does not, really can't get going from 3-point range. Goes 2 for 13 from deep. Now, Houston has one of the best perimeter defenses in the country. So that's, maybe not to be expected, but that's what they do. It's like 2 for 13 is kind of around their percentage average as well. But it just goes to show that UCF is, with a couple fewer turnovers and maybe a 1 or 2 extra threes, UCF is possibly winning that game. I mean, I know it ends up as a 9-point margin, but it wasn't, there wasn't much of a difference between those two teams on that Saturday. So I think ultimately it was an encouraging showing, not a happy showing, or ultimately they're disappointed, but certainly things you can take away from it moving forward now into Saturday's game at USF.
It was amazing to me, Murph, and from this game, and it was that people forget this. 8:54 to go in the second half. Darius Perry makes a jumper to make it 46-41. Houston was up by 5 at that point. And UCF doesn't gets one field goal, one made shot from the floor the rest of the game. And that came with 28 seconds to go. They had one field goal in the final 9 minutes, which, first of all, is a credit to Houston's defense. They were outstanding. They are as advertised. And this is going to be, and by the way, this is a much different Houston team than what we're going to see later on in the year, because, obviously we only saw a very, very little bit of Caleb Mills. Even though he was a factor down the stretch, it certainly was not the kind of Caleb Mills game that we were expecting from the preseason Player of the Year. But give credit to Houston's defense. And here was UCF with, what was it? 2 minutes and 15 seconds to go. They're down 4.
Right.
Having not made a shot in 6 minutes. And,
right.
And they were right there. They were right there.
There were a lot of turnovers. And again, they weren't making a shot. There were a lot of turnovers, a lot of misses. Yeah, I agree. I think we could all sort of look at that and go like, yeah, they're right there with this team. Caleb Mills was outstanding in the final couple of minutes where he made 2 gigantic baskets, and not only that were decisive in the game, but also kind of showcased his skill and ability, and one of the reasons why he's the conference preseason Player of the Year in those 2 baskets, which were just high-level skill shots or high-level skill plays. But also, Johnny Dawkins talked about that stretch, that 8-minute stretch without a field goal down, closing in those final 8-9 minutes. And he just said that they need to be playing with more poise, more patience going forward. I think I look at that and say he just didn't like the shot selection. Yeah. That maybe they settled too much, kind of like they did in the Michigan game, and he wants them to sort of just run a more patient offense. We'll see what happens against USF, who really played pretty well for about 30 minutes at Memphis, was up by 12 with about 10 minutes to go, and then completely imploded with a bevy of turnovers that allowed Memphis to come back and ultimately win that game by 1, as they were outscored something like 22-7 down the stretch. It was really a bad loss for USF, but for them to hang with Memphis, and for UCF to hang with Houston. I know Memphis isn't particularly great this year, but that kind of gives both those teams, I would say, some encouragement heading into this game.
Yeah. Leading scorers for UCF, by the way, for the game, Darius Perry and Brandon Mahan had 13 each, 12 for Darren Green Jr. Eric, Coach Dawkins was talking afterwards about how Brandon Mahan needs to, understand that he's a marked man now. And I think that was certainly the case. Houston did key on him very much, held him to only 8 shots, 4 of them went in. He did get to the line a little bit, 5 out of 6 there, and even though he led the team in scoring, it was clear that their objective was to shut him down. And we saw, Isaiah Adams actually performed pretty well, I think, in his, I'm sorry, Isaiah Adams had a very rough game, I think. He was only 1 of 6, 2 points. I think they really did a good job on him. But this was actually a pretty good day for Darren Green because he was able to get open. And did hit 5 of 12 shots, even though he only hit 1 3. But this is again, it was a effort from Houston defensively. But yeah, this is one of those cases where, okay, what do you do when, teams know how to play your top guys and the secret gets out? Like, what do you do here? So what do we learn from this, Eric?
I think that's the question, and we were going to see if we were going to find that out against Tulane, how this team would react to it. Now we got to wait till the South Florida game on Saturday. But you mentioned Mayhem, and I think the 8 shot attempts, and he's going to have to be aggressive every game, and I think that was Johnny's message. Brandon, because Brandon and Murph, we've talked about it on the night shift. Last year, he would have big games and then, not have, be as aggressive the next game and things like that. Well, he kind of has to be aggressive. Right now, this offense, what we've learned is this team is at its best when Mayhem is rolling and attacking the basket and being aggressive and trying to score, being maybe your marquee scorer. And then you got Adams, your freshman. He got it dealt with the 2 quick fouls, and I think the foul issues kind of threw him off against a good defense with Houston.
Yeah.
And so it's those two and probably, Darren. That's been their 3 main scorers until we kind of see what happens with Fuller and, obviously with Perry. So, for Mayhem, I think they just want the shots to go up because the way he's playing, if he gets, instead of 8 shots, get him up to 13, 14. Don't force bad shots, but I think Johnny's point is just stay aggressive. And I think, but in Houston, in Mayhem's defense, I think Houston gave him some different looks. They were not going to give him a lot of space, and I think Brandon will adjust to that. And I think they'll be fine. And Murph, you even mentioned this when we were live on the night shift after the game, where it was Mayhem and Perry, right? Where they were talking. People were telling you that they were talking, already kind of figuring out what went wrong and what, the leadership was showing right away after the game. Like, in other words, it wasn't that there seems to be leadership developing within the team.
Yeah, they were sort of doing like a postmortem, a bit of an autopsy on this game. And this was about 40 minutes after the game or so. And I was wrapping up to head out to join you on the night shift. And I ran into someone with the program who said, Darius Perry and Brandon Mahan are still in there basically talking ball, basically strategizing and talking about what went wrong, what they can do better, and basically, sort of just already game planning. And that's a great sign. And it's one thing you want to see out of your seniors, especially a guy like Darius Perry, who has been in a ton of ACC battles against the best teams in the nation night in, night out. For him to face a team like Houston is just another night at the office. This is not, we all see it as this big opportunity for UCF to prove itself. But for Darius Perry, like he knows what it's like to play in these games all the time. So that's what you kind of want to see. But also it just kind of shows you that this team has leadership, and that when things go rough or things go sideways or things don't go the way they want them to, this team has at least a couple of guys that I think can maybe pull this team together and galvanize. So. I don't think this team, and this is going to be famous last words, but I don't think this loss will all of a sudden beset this team into some sort of swoon as we head into the new year. I think this team understands this was a loss. There's things to change and clean up and execute more properly. But I think they'll be able to turn the page because of guys like Mahan and Perry.
Yeah. Drew, what do you think from the game?
Well, my biggest take is look at the minutes played. UCF had 4 guys who played over 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Darren Green played 38 out of 40 minutes versus Houston only had 2 guys over 30 minutes. You're playing a 7-man rotation. They gassed out. We saw it against Cincinnati. They built a big lead. It started wilting away as the second half wore on. They ran out. They got tired. You're trying to run a 7-man rotation. It's tough. And that's when you Tony Johnson's out, really, really hurting. But you look at turnovers and control. Darren Green, no turnovers. Fuller, 7 turnovers. I mean, obviously playing a positionless game like Coach Dawkins has going on this year, which is definitely an unconventional way. But I sort of understand it because you look at Darius Perry and you say point guard, but he doesn't play like a point guard. He plays more like a 2 guard. He's more of a create your shot guy more than a facilitator. And as a result, you need guys such as, bigger players like Mobley to step in and be a passing facilitator that you normally don't get out of larger players. But what comes of that also comes the mental grind of having to maintain that intensity because you're almost playing out of position, and it wears you out. And until they can get guys into shape and back on the court, it's going to be tough against the upper echelon of the conference. UCF made it a half and a half, 3/4 of a game. Tulsa just turned around and knocked them off in very interesting fashion by 1 point. But I think part of that could have been Houston being a little run down from the suffocating zone defense that UCF employs. I mean, I was impressed with how good that zone defense was at just absolutely throwing off a much more talented Cougar program. I mean, we love UCF. We love what they do. But let's call a spade. Houston was a more talented program, and the Knights hung with them. And it all comes down to that zone defense that they just couldn't figure out until they wore UCF's stamina down.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And the thing that I was impressed by was okay, so Houston comes in. We know they're the bigger team, right? I mean, they have big guys up front that they can throw at you. Bryson Gresham in particular. He finished. He actually didn't miss a shot and finished with 8 points, even though he fouled out. But UCF held Houston to 18 of 50. That's 36% from the field, including 8 of 26 in the first half. UCF on the other side was 16 of 43, which is 37%. So, you got to do better on that perspective. And also, like you mentioned, Murph, only 2 of 13 from 3-point range was UCF at 15.4%. This was a classic conference play defensive battle, but I was really pleased with the fact that when the offense wasn't clicking, the defense clicked on, and they knew what they had to do in order to do it against what was, like you said, Drew, a much more talented Houston team, up and down the roster, and on top of the fact that they had, like we said earlier, such a tremendous depth advantage at this point, because UCF's MO right now is we're going to play small. And we're going to force you into a mismatch, and that worked. That worked against Cincinnati, and it darn near worked against Houston. I'm really curious how it's going to work against USF though, because you got Yetna back. That's going to be a really interesting matchup here, don't you think, Murph?
Well, do they have Yetna back?
Yeah, we don't know yet.
Oh, no, we don't know yet, do we? Oh, yeah, that's right.
He did not play the Memphis game, to everybody's shock. Nobody announced anything. He just showed up. He was I watched the whole game. He was literally up on the bench, and nobody oh, by the way, yeah, he's not playing. Oh, well, that's kind of important. And then it finally came out during the Memphis game that he has a strained left hip or a strained issue.
They called it a lower leg strain.
Right, lower leg strain, yeah.
I do that every time I pick up my daughter. But anyway.
That's because you're old.
Yeah, that's true.
That leads me to fear, are we talking calf strain? Because if it's a calf strain, then that could be problematic depending on the severity. Right. So we'll see if Yetna's available. I wanted to mention another thing too. Actually, if you want to widen the scope a little bit and look at UCF's next few games, because Drew mentioned Tulsa's narrow win over Houston last night, being Tuesday. So they beat Houston. Tulsa's off to a quick 2-0 start in conference with victories at Memphis and against Houston. and so after this USF game, the UCF will play on Saturday. They'll host Memphis next week on Tuesday, and then they will have Tulsa on the road next Saturday, the January the 9th. So that Tulsa game now, they were preseason, kind of in the middle of the pack, just above UCF in the preseason rankings. I don't know. I mean, what we've seen early on is Tulsa has taken down some good teams.
Tulsa with this freaking gold dust season of theirs again. This team, unbelievable.
Well, here's the thing, though. I mean, and we forget this because literally the season shut down literally before the conference tournament starts, as Murph can oblige, as one of the few people in the building at the Dickies Arena. Tulsa was the regular season champions. They were the co-regular season champions last year of the league, and their issue was they can beat anybody at home, but struggled on the road. As a result, their net rankings were not very good. We're kind of seeing the same thing. They're very good at home. They beat Houston. There we go, at home. We know the success of UCF athletics in Tulsa, guys, don't we?
What success?
Exactly. And to me, that's the big thing that hurts about the Tulane game being postponed is because, Murph, I remember you brought that up on the night shift is, hey, they got this Tulane game to kind of get over the Houston game and get a win. And, well, they didn't get that. So now they got to go to South Florida, a team that's a lot better than their record shows. You brought up the Memphis game they blew. They also blew a Wichita State game very similar fashion, in a similar way, where they kind of got pressured and turned the ball over. They really could have easily won 2 conference games, and their schedule would be completely different. I think that's going to be a real tough battle playing them.
They've already won at Cincinnati leading into those 2 losses. So
that's right.
With some better ball handling, USF could be 3-0.
And they would be the team that, it's kind of weird because last year, Murph, we've teased you about, how high you were on it, but you weren't alone. There were a lot of people that thought South Florida would be the sleeper team in the league. They had the injury to Yetna, and it just didn't, everything went wrong. And yet they've kind of been under the radar this year, and I watched them. They're really good. They're not I could see why people like them. It's just, can it all work together? And my worry is they blew a lead against Wichita State. They blew this game against Memphis. They should have won the game. They didn't get a whistle at the end, probably because it's Memphis and it's at Memphis. And Penny probably paid them off, paid the refs. What?
Oh, my God. What's
Just kidding.
Bitter party of one.
Wow.
I just heard you never know. But that
I've heard of casting aspersions, but that just takes the cake. Anyway,
just
go ahead.
kidding. But they're good. David Collins, their guard, he's been in the league, 10 years going?
He's got tenure in the conference.
Yes.
But they've got, I'll tell you, the freshmen, we've talked a lot about Isaiah Adams and Mr. UCF basketball, as I call him. Caleb Murphy, their freshman, he might be Mr. USF basketball. The kid was tremendous, was the best player on the court against Memphis. He was tremendous, and he's been really playing well. Gregory's a good coach. And look, Murph, you were there last year, and I'm sure you guys saw it last year. The worst game that UCF played last season was at USF, and the UCF's gonna have to be ready here for this game on Saturday. That is gonna be a tough game. And then you got Memphis, who has talent. You don't know which Memphis team shows up. And at Tulsa, this is going to be an interesting 3-game stretch. And then they still got to go to Temple, who's not good, but it's still on the road. And then you go to Houston.
Yeah. So that's 4 of the next 5 on the road. Yikes.
Yeah.
I will say that is the key to the game. As we talked about UCF's turnovers in this game, 17 against Houston. Murphy and Collins in these last 2 games, these narrow losses for USF, those 2 combined in the last 2 games have turned the ball over 18 times. So it really comes down to who shoots themselves in the foot less.
Yeah.
You look at the conference, the American is a pretty solid conference. There's only 2 teams with losing records. There's the conference as a whole is ranked 7th in the net right now. If you use the old RPI system, they're 2nd. And, you have multiple teams in the top 100. Houston's obviously leading the way, but Cincinnati 2-5 record. They're 51 in the net because they're playing tough teams. This is not a Mickey Mouse cookie cutter conference. This is a tough league. And Eric, you talked about Tulsa. Tulsa's got they got 1 loss, but they got that big win against Houston. There's no gimme games at this point.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be. We've already talked about how many times can we possibly say how unique this season is going to be, and in particular, this is just going to be a dogfight in the American. And by the way, when you zoom out and look at the standings, SMU and Wichita are 2-0 to start off. Tulsa 3-1, Memphis 2-1, Houston 2-2. Theoretically tied with East Carolina and UCF at 500 in the conference right now, but yeah, this is going to be this is going to be a dogfight, this conference, the rest of the way, and I'm all for it because we're going to see some weird results. Although I'm not sure how that's going to play out in the NCAA tournament selection time with all these teams beating up on each other.
That's going to be the big question. I think Houston's going to be a lock. They're fine. Like the Tulsa game was a flip of a coin. It happens. I wouldn't read too much. SMU, I still think is the 2nd best team. They're undefeated. They won their conference game on Wednesday. The question's going to be, if we depending on this weird season, is can the American get a third team into the field? Can a third team establish themselves, whether it be Tulsa, can Memphis, UCF? I'm going to throw South Florida in there. I like what I've seen from South Florida. That if they played 32-minute games instead of 40, they could be very undefeated right now. If they could figure out how to close games, I think they're really good. I think I was very impressed with seeing them against Memphis, and then other games I've seen them in before on ESPN Plus. So I think that's, to me, and I think, Murph, we may have mentioned this on the night shift. I think from 3 to 9, it's a toss-up. It could come down to a couple of bounces, an injury could make the difference in the world in this league.
Yeah, and it is too bad that UCF doesn't get this Tulane game now, because like we talked about, this was a game that UCF should have won maybe by double digits. I believe the spread here was 8 in UCF's favor.
I saw 7, but yeah, right around there.
Yeah, and this would have been one of the easier games, so to speak, on UCF's schedule, and would have been a good bounce back. And unfortunately, they don't have that, and now they got to go on the road in a rivalry game against, again, a team we've said many times, but a team that has played better than the results.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll have to see on that one. Now, that's going to be an ESPN Plus game, right, Eric?
That is correct, folks. After the high of ABC, which, by the way, and you'll see it on blackandgoldbanneret.com right now, the most watched UCF regular season basketball game of all time. In fact, it's the most watched UCF non-NCAA tournament men's basketball game of all time this past Saturday against Houston. Did a big number. To put it in perspective, it did better than 6 UCF football games this year. It crushed Orlando City playoff game numbers. It did a really good number. So
that's good.
Good day for the league. Good day for the league. I have all the details on blackandgoldbanneret.com on that. But yes, we're back to ESPN Plus.
Yay, ABC.
Yeah, I was going to say, go ahead, Drew. I'm sorry.
I just said, yay, ABC.
Yeah.
That's the benefit of network television.
That's the benefit of that. I hate saying it, Drew, but you were right, Eric. Hate saying it, but that TV contract, more ABC opportunities, always good for the league. Always good for UCF, too.
It's the trade-off. And this is the thing people don't get. Because you helping ESPN out with all the content you're providing on ESPN Plus, you're going to get more benefit of the doubt in return. And I think we've seen that at football. Remember, UCF East Carolina got moved to ABC. We see this with the UCF Houston game. This is ESPN repaying the league, kind of paying back, and that's how the relationship works. So there's positives. I know some people don't like all the ESPN Plus stuff, but guess what? The Big 12's going that route. The SEC and their new TV deal, they're going to have more games in ESPN Plus. So I think it was a big plus, big positive there. And by the way, the Memphis game will be scheduled for ESPNU 9 o'clock tip, boys.
Yeah, I know.
East.
We got to bring the coffee to the arena that night, huh?
I don't know. I'm worried about what Murph's going to bring to drink.
I'll bring coffee.
Okay. And then the Tulsa game, that's an ESPN Plus 2 o'clock in the afternoon from beautiful Tulsa, Oklahoma on Saturday the night. On Wild Card NFL Saturday. Holy smokes.
Hope you got extra TVs. Murph, I know you got extra TVs set up for that one. Got that one. So, all right, so we'll keep an eye on that game against USF. I think, hey, if you get a victory over USF on the road coming off that loss to Houston, that's an even bigger boost than a win over a Tulane team you should have beaten. So
I want people to understand this is a very tough game. This is like, in fact, I will predict when the numbers usually come out the day before. Is that how that's been, right? Like a day before the day of?
Yeah.
I would expect South Florida to actually be favored. I think they'll be favored by 3 points, 4 points.
Okay. All right. We'll keep an eye on that. So meanwhile, on the other side, the women's side. Another game. Them. We can't forget about them because actually they're off to a really good start, people. Please pay attention. They're 4-1, 2-0 in the conference. But they haven't played since December the 19th when they beat Tulsa by 11 points. And by the way, in Tulsa, mind you, so much for the UCF curse in Tulsa.
Somebody.
But
all right, bring Coach Abe to any future football and men's basketball games to Tulsa.
Yeah, just bring her with you because she's the good luck charm. UCF has had their last 2 games postponed. Georgia Tech on December 21st, and then Memphis. It was supposed to be a doubleheader at home on tonight, this Wednesday. They were scheduled to play Memphis at 5 p.m., followed by the men, and then that game got scotched actually a few days ago. Yeah, Saturday. So
they're smart. They don't waste time.
Yeah, they didn't waste any time. That would have been an ESPN Plus game. So now the next time we see UCF women's basketball will be Sunday, January 3rd, at home against Houston. That game will be on ESPNU. The day after the UCF men's game is at South Florida. When you look at the American standings right now, this is how it shakes out right now. There are 5 teams who are undefeated, and then everybody else is winless in the league. So your undefeated teams are South Florida, East Carolina, Houston, UCF, and Temple. Right now Temple actually is the worst out of them at 2-3 overall, but 2-0 in the league. But ECU's 5-3. USF's off to a 6-1 start. We kind of expected that. Houston's a little bit of a surprise, but Ronald Hughey, former UCF assistant, got this team playing hard. 5-1 off to a 5-1 start, and UCF is at 4-1. And so that's the situation that we're looking at right now for UCF women's basketball, as we just wait for them to sort of restart their season. By the way, some of Houston's wins, they got a big win at Oklahoma to start the season, and they also beat Auburn by double digits. And they're coming off of wins at Memphis and at home against Wichita State to start off conference play. So it's a pretty doggone good Houston team that Ronald Hughey has actually rebuilt from the ground up. So really happy for Ron, because he was such an enthusiastic assistant under Joy Williams for all those years.
Well, and you want to know the storyline here, all right? Murph and Andrew, you're going to love this little storyline. Houston's top scorer, Brittany Onyeje. Hopefully I did.
Brittany Onyeje.
Thank you. Guys, this is why Jeff's the PA guy. I am not. So what's fascinating, she's a Pflugerville, Texas. You know where she transferred from, right?
UCF.
Look at that. Bing, ding, ding. That's correct.
Yeah.
You're on top of this. I didn't even know that until I was kind of studying this game. So this is you don't see that often. She transferred, sat out last year, and here she is. I would assume, and having a great start to the season, averaging 16 points a game. They have been the surprise. You mentioned Ronald Hughey, former UCF assistant under Joy Williams. They have been the surprise. They beat Oklahoma. They've beaten Auburn. They are a lot better. I think they're the surprise, and that's going to be a tall game, big game for UCF, who's had a lot of time off. So you wonder, rust versus rest. The women, that's going to be interesting how that plays out. The game's going to be on ESPNU on Sunday, but it's a huge game because, we've talked about USF and UCF being the top teams in the league. South Florida is ranked in the top 25. UCF's receiving votes, and perhaps a couple of wins away from that historic milestone of being a top 25 ranked team for the first time in the Division I era. Well, Houston could spoil all that. They're very capable. I think this could be a one-possession game very easily. They've played some close games in the past. Houston likes to shoot the three a lot. So this is going to be a heck of a ball game, and I'm very nervous about this because Houston's playing with good rhythm, good consistency, and UCF now hasn't played since December 19th. That's, to me, my concern going into Sunday.
Well, I want to add something real quick before we jump over how to make this game even bigger. We know that the men use the net rankings for figuring out tournaments. The women still use the RPI. Houston's 14th in the RPI. They're up there, and UCF's currently 99th. So they need a top 25 RPI win, and this would be it. And obviously they get a second chance at Houston later in the season, near the end of January. But that makes this game even bigger. Aside from it being on TV, you have the connections of head coach and players. You need it from the standing standpoint and the ranking standpoint. You need that RPI boost.
Yeah, interesting point here for this game. This is going to be the key breakdown. How does UCF play in the first quarter in particular? Because UCF has not been very good in the first quarter this season. They're getting outscored by 19 points by their opponents. And Houston likes to jump out. They're outscoring their opponents by 15 points total in the first quarter.
And Houston is probably the team that could be the foil to South Florida and Houston. You know, before the season, a lot of people thought, well, maybe it's Tulane. They're off to a slow start. Cincinnati is clearly in a rebuild year. They have the best preseason player of the year in Thomas, but they don't have much around there because a lot of the players around there from last year graduated. They're 1-5 overall. They're off to a slow start. So to me, who is the team that could foil South Florida and UCF? It might be this Houston team. It might be. They have the firepower to do it. So I'm actually looking forward to this game on ESPNU. You mentioned multiple TVs. I will have that ready because obviously there's a very important NFL Sunday at 1 o'clock. Right, Drew? Big, important 1 o'clock block between your Browns and my Dolphins trying to get in, and then Murph and Jeff's Giants trying to play out draft picks or whatever.
All right, now listen. We either get the NFC East crown, which awesome, or we get the number 3 pick in the draft, which is just as awesome. I'll take it.
Well, I mean, 6-10 and going to the playoffs, and it's almost disgraceful.
Whatever, I'll take it.
I mean, it is what it is, and that's actually what makes playoffs beautiful. Is that there's concrete rules on how to get in. You win your division,
concept,
you get in, or you get one of the wild cards. That's a playoff. Shocking.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, apparently we reward 6-10 teams because of it. Go figure.
No, we're not rewarding anyone. It's just them's the rules. We didn't make it up.
Oh. Yeah, maybe we should.
You play to win the game.
You play to win.
By the way, I do have to correct you. If the Texans lose to the Titans, go Jeremy Brenner, who has predicted that his beloved Texans will lose. The Dolphins will lock up the 3rd pick because they have the Texans.
Rooting
pick.
for the Texans.
Yes. But I do want to say back to basketball. So
I love how Murph
I don't see how.
Away from that whole
he just dove out of that. But we mentioned UCF is being outscored by 19 points in the first quarter. In the second quarter total this year, UCF has outscored their opponents by 40 points combined, 96-56 in the second quarter, and by 14 points in the third quarter. Houston struggles down the stretch. They're even in the second, +2 in the third, and -15 in the fourth. So I expect UCF to, I would not. So if UCF falls down early in this game, that shouldn't be a surprise. That happens quite often, but they make their hay in the middle 2 quarters, and Houston kind of struggles in the fourth a little bit. So
tempo is going to be a key. Houston likes to play in the 70s. I don't know if UCF wants to get into that. Houston also averages. They average shooting like 8 threes per game, so they're going to shoot threes. How UCF defends that will be a key factor in that ball game. And it's going to be a fun game.
Yep.
That's a big game. So hopefully that'll get me off to a good start and a good mood as I watch that and then the Dolphin game. Because if that I'm a believer in superstition. If one team wins early, then that sets the tone for the next teams that I root for. Yeah. So let's go Knights. Let's beat Houston. But that's going to be a fun game.
And one last note, too. We talked about how important free throw shooting is, especially on the men's side. Well, right now, Houston's just 60% as a team from the free throw strike. Yep. UCF, by the way, only 67%. Not that much better, but still better. So whichever team wins the free throw battle and whichever team plays better defense, I think after the first quarter is going to be key. So, all right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about this year, 2020. Just a bizarre year. It's been a very sad and maddening and strange year for everybody in more ways than one. But when we talk about it from the UCF perspective, what are some of the positives that we can take away from it? And what are the things that we're just going to be left wondering about as we head into 2021? Stick around. We'll be right back.
Today's episode is brought to you by Cars.com. With over 2 million vehicles and 50,000 more added every day, Cars.com will match you with the perfect car for you, your budget, your life, your style. And if you're ready to say goodbye to your current car, Cars.com will get you an instant offer to cash it in. Just start by entering your license plate and get matched with a local dealer who will write you the check. So whether you're looking to buy or sell, just go to Cars.com. It's magical.
Welcome back to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Jeff Sharon, Eric Lopez, Brian Murphy, Andrew Glukov joining here for our final show of 2020. You can follow us at UCF_Banneret, Facebook.com/Black and Gold Banneret, and of course, blackandgoldbanneret.com. We are the home of UCF Sports on SB Nation. And as we have been throughout this bizarre year 2020, going back to March when everything, when the sports world just came to a halt, and it hurt everybody. It hurt, in more ways than one. But we can talk. There's no sense in waxing poetic right now about what we all know is that this has been a really sad year for a lot of people. We've there's been a lot of suffering in not just this country but around the world thanks to COVID-19, and at the very least, at least sports gave us a little bit of a respite from that. As strange as it has been, playing sports in front of empty or mostly empty venues, and all the controversies that have been surrounding sometimes even the very fact that we are playing sports at all right now. It's certainly something that we can debate, but we won't do that on this show, at least right now. But what we will talk about is when we look back at the calendar year of 2020, what will we remember that were some of the positive things from the world of UCF? And then we're also going to look back in this segment at some of the biggest what ifs. What are the biggest what ifs that we're going to look back on and say, man, if only this had happened, what would we be talking about right now? So we'll get to that in a second. But first, let's talk about some of the things that we'll remember from 2020 and that were positive things that came from the world of UCF sports. And Murph, I want to start with you because all throughout this year you've been so plugged in on everything. What's the one thing that but you've always had such great perspective on it too, and that's the one thing that I always appreciated about it. But what's the one thing that you'll look back on and say, this is something that I remember the most?
I didn't pay Jeff to compliment me on my plugged-inness nor my perspective, but I appreciate that. The thing that stood out to me, as far as because I don't want to stick to just sports here because it doesn't feel right to just say like there's a game or a play or a team that stuck out, but really because this year had so much more beyond just the realm of sports, in it. The thing that sticks out to me was the effort by UCF student athletes to get registered to vote, to which there was 100% registration among the entire student athlete body. Every single one of them, whether they were already registered or had never registered, did become registered to vote in this election, in this presidential election back in November. Greg McCrae, I think, most famously, really spearheaded the effort to get the entire UCF football team registered to vote. And there are pictures online of Greg sitting with his teammates as they're putting in their information on documents and electronic forms to get themselves registered. And I think that in this year, that's one of the things that's most important, more than any win or loss or play. That was important. And so that's something that for me sticks out as a supreme positive from this year.
I will always hold a soft spot in my heart for Greg McCrae, who, by the way, earlier today announced that he, or yesterday actually, I should say, that he is leaving UCF and going to show off his wares at the professional ranks. We'll have more on that in our final segment, but nobody I think understands what it means to be a citizen in UCF world more than Greg McCrae does. Having been at Navy, having been at the Naval Academy, even though he eventually left and came here, much to the benefit of UCF certainly, but you don't get to that point, as an 18-year-old without understanding what it takes to be a citizen. And Greg McCrae is certainly, you're absolutely right, Murph. I mean, Greg McCrae certainly stepped up his game and helped out, not just his own teammates, but a lot of, a number of UCF student athletes, and also helping out in his volunteer work, a number of players also who are a number of other UCF students who I'm sure may not have had the opportunity to register to vote, actually did get the opportunity to register to him. So big ups to Greg McCrae. We're going to miss him around here a lot. What a dude. Eric, I'll go with you next. What do you got?
I think you and Murph kind of hit really the highlights there, the main points, the most important parts there, where the voting registration. I remember Coach Dawkins, the basketball team, right? I think that's moving forward. I would say, would you guys agree the next every time we're having election night that everybody's gonna be registered to vote? And I think that's gonna pay dividends, not just this year, but in future elections, to get young people to elect and vote and be active. And I think that's a huge positive. So I think you both nailed that very well on that. The only thing I would add is, look, and because I know we're going to spend more time on what went wrong with football, I guess, in the next segment, but I will say the biggest positive from football playing is that they got to play, and they played 10 games, and that didn't have to be rescheduled. I know that they had the FIU game before the year, but that had nothing to do with them. For them to kind of stick it out, and I know there was opt-outs, but to play 9-10 games and provide a diversion, if you will, for a few hours for people, even if they were mad about the results, was a pretty amazing stuff what they did. I didn't think that a lot of teams could accomplish that. They were one of the few that did without really too many interruptions. And so that's something of a salute to them on that regard. But I think everything you hit is kind of the highlights of 2020. And from that standpoint, from a UCF standpoint, and just kind of, watching their best interest. And that was very big thing that certainly will be remembered. But certainly the off the field stuff, you mentioned the Greg McCrae stuff and the voting, I think by far stands at the top.
I do want to echo that too in terms of UCF football and getting these 10 games off without losing any of them to COVID, issues within their clubhouse, right? Is when we look back on it, I think pretty remarkable. And it speaks to the incredible commitment and dedication and discipline. Yes, let's use that word, discipline, of the players and the coaching staff. And in terms of understanding, what they needed to do in order to get the season off. And I think that, that went underappreciated this year. And I think that that's something that, when we look back on it and all the controversies that we're seeing around college football now, bowl games getting canceled at the last minute. It's pretty amazing that they were able to pull that off. How about you, Drew? What do you got?
Well, we talk about sports and stuff, but what derailed sports altogether, and obviously that was COVID-19. My thing of the year was looking away from sports altogether, and I got to call out Darren Edwards. He's a UCF triple grad, got his bachelor's, got his master's, got his doctorate in biomedical sciences from UCF. He's the director at Moderna who did the non-clinical research to get the Moderna vaccine that's now being distributed out there to try and get rid of this horrible, pandemic. He needs to be called out too, because how many other schools can say, "Hey, our guy was the head researcher on getting this vaccine out there for one of the big two that are currently out." Obviously, we've got another one on its way, but right now there's only two. So Darren Edwards works at Moderna. He's been there for not quite 2 years. He's the director of infectious diseases, works with the National Institute of Health. But the work that he's done to try and curtail this pandemic we're dealing with, which if they're successful, sports comes back. Now, it may take a while because we have to create and distribute and all this other stuff, but their success becomes sports success, and I think we have to remember that.
Yeah. Gosh, that's awesome. It's rare that you see somebody who's a 3-time UCF graduate, right? Because usually they tell you, want to go to some other school to get your grad work done, but he got it done here at UCF, and props to Mr. Edwards for his hard work and the hard work of his staff on this. And you're right. We're not going to see sports be fully back until we get to a certain point where enough people have a vaccine or have developed immunity, and that's a heavy lift that hopefully we'll be able to take on as a society from through the spring and into the summer. Because I'm optimistic that at least in 2021, in the fall of 2021, we'll have hopefully things will be back to some semblance of normal. We can have a full spectrum or a full bounce house for football in 2021. My thing that I'll remember is, this has been a tough holiday season for a lot of people, and the holidays are sometimes tough for a lot more people than you think. And then this one was even tougher considering the economic conditions we've been under. But a couple of former UCF guys really stepped up their game this year, and for the second year in a row they've done this. Our old buddies Ant Roberson and Jordan Johnson again completed their second annual toy drive, and the fact that they were able to pull that off in the midst of a pandemic is pretty remarkable in and of itself. So I wanted to give a shout out to those two fellas, who we've all talked to more than once, and we're big fans of them. And no matter what they do, and for them to do that it's just been it just shows the again, similar to what Greg McCrae is, the citizenship that these guys that the UCF student athletes show, outside of the arena, and it's just really encouraging to see. They're great citizens, and I hope they continue to do that. So, big credit to Ant and JJ on that. So, because they deserve it, and a job well done by them making it a happy Christmas for some kids out there. All right, now we'll get to the stuff that we're going to think about, going forward, the what ifs of this year. I mean, and Lord knows there were a lot of them. But Eric, I'll start with you on this one. When you look at the biggest what if from 2020 for UCF, what is it?
Without question, is the what ifs bring UCF baseball and softball. I mean, they were having tremendous seasons, both top 25 teams, both rolling along.
Had no signs of slowing down, either of them.
No, very talented teams. I mean, I remember, obviously, baseball, the final of it there against Miami. It was a packed house. They lost by 1, and that's the night that the sports shut down, and softball blew out a very good Cal State Fullerton. But, yeah, they were headed for historic years, especially softball. I think they were going to steamroll through the American, could have put themselves in position the way they were playing to possibly host for the first time, or at least be in contention, have a dynamic offense with a deep pitching staff. And then baseball had a deep pitching staff as well, with maybe the most dominant closer in UCF, at least for a single season, that any UCF closer ever had, which Murph will talk. I'll defer to Murph on that because he got to see him on a daily basis in Hakinson. But both teams having great seasons, and it got derailed. And what's unfortunate for both of those teams, there'll be that those teams will always have that what if. It's always going to be that what if things would have turned out differently. How would have season played out for both of those programs? And now, they hope to get back on the field in 2021 and try to reduplicate that, which will not be easy, especially on the baseball side with a lot of the personnel they lost from that team. Softball is fortunate in that they pretty much returned the core, pretty much just about everybody from last year's team. But as we know, in sports, it's tough to kind of just bottle all that up and just assume that it's just going to be the same the following year. It's not. So that will always be the what if, is what if for baseball and softball that season. And I'll even include tennis. Remember, tennis was off to good starts too, and the women's was coming off that Sweet 16 year the year before. The men's team was off to a tremendous start. I just feel bad for those groups, because that could have been a real special year, maybe the greatest spring in the history of the athletic department.
When the season was called off, baseball was 15-3. Softball was 21-5-1. I mean, that's.
And those two were ranked, and both tennis programs were ranked at the time.
Yeah, it's true. Murph, what about you?
Well, I mean, it's always hard for me to sort of shy away from baseball here, because it was a super regional type team, and Jeffrey Hakinson having just an incredible year. I don't know the strike. He had like a weird strikeout to walk. He had it was like 27-1 strikeout to walk. It was really he had some dumb stats because he was just amazing as a closer. I do remember he had a 3% free ball rate. Like, he wasn't even walking people. He wasn't even giving them 3 balls. It was just too bad because that team was so good and had so much pitching and enough hitting finally to really even it out. So, but because Eric really said most of that, I will go to something that I think people were looking forward to for about 9 months, and that was a matchup between 2 top 20 football teams in North Carolina and UCF, and 2 of the best young quarterbacks in the sport with Sam Howell and Dylan Gabriel. And people were talking about that almost as soon as the Gasparilla Bowl ended, because North Carolina had I know Howell had a big bowl game too last year. So people were looking at that as like, wow, what a way to start the season. 2 ranked teams, 2, I think, sophomore quarterbacks, and it's going to be a great showcase and a great test out of the gate. And that didn't happen. And so, we can bicker about how this season ended, and I guess we will. But that, regardless of how everything turned out, not being able to see that game, that sort of personal quarterback matchup, really, it sucked, because again, we were looking forward to that for the better part of 9 months.
Yeah. I mean, and there was even some speculation that maybe we would get matched up with them in the bowl game. But, it's... Yeah,
Wow.
I mean, you're right. It's a bummer.
No, they're in Florida. They're playing in Florida.
Yeah,
they're playing.
not far away.
Yeah. That's about it.
So close. Drew, what about you?
Well, for me, it's, what if the 10 players that opted out didn't, in football? Because I think that made a big difference in how the trajectory of that season went. You had 2 starters, Tay Gowan, who was their best corner coming into the season. You teamed up with Antoine Collier and Richie Grant. You had a very solid defensive backfield. Kalia Davis, a starting defensive tackle, and Mason Shalewa, who is a rotational guy. And then you have Devontae Dawson, who was supposed to be part of their 2 deep as well. There's 4 guys within the 2 deep that are gone on the defensive side before the season ever starts. And we've seen what happened as a result. I mean, the defense got torched regularly. You had freshmen coming in and having to play a lot of meaningful time when they could have been better served by not having to play. What would have happened differently if those 4 players were still there? I think we can definitely say that the Memphis game would have ended differently. We can probably say the Cincinnati game would have ended differently, and we could say that the Tulsa game would have ended differently. I don't think the bowl game would have changed all that much unless they ran the complete table and got to a better bowl game. I think with everything going on, it was in-state or bust outside of the New Year's Six. So let's assume they still ended up in the same bowl game. You still have players opt out. I think the result would have been the same but a little bit closer. But I think the dynamic of the team really, really changed when those 4 players opted out. So the what if is, what if they didn't?
Yeah. That's one thing that we're going to be wondering about with 20. So many things about the football season in 20. I'm sorry, Brian. Go ahead.
I was just saying, it's funny, you bring that up, and Drew, if those 3 games you mentioned, if those games turn out differently, then UCF is playing for a conference title, and they're in a different bowl game regardless if they win or lose that game. And if they win that game, then we're extrapolating a lot. I get it, but it's the domino effect of this. If those players don't opt out, then those 3 close games might change the result, which means UCF is playing in a conference title game. If they win that game, they're in a New Year's Day 6 bowl, and then probably guys like Richie Grant and Aaron Robinson maybe aren't opting out early of that game. Possibly, maybe they play in that game and UCF has a chance to win that game too. And so it's crazy to say that those opt outs are the difference between UCF possibly being undefeated. But you can squint and see the results and look at what went wrong and go boy, if they had some holes plugged here, and it was those guys who were there. Yeah, it's kind of interesting to sort of unfold all of that and see the scenarios.
Yeah. They had their highest ranking, right? Regular season all time going into that Tulsa game. Weren't they 10? At that point, I mean, they were the flavor talked about preseason. Hey, they could crash the party, make the playoff, especially if the Big Ten is out and things like that. I mean, it was set up to be this big game. And,
UCF was 11. UCF was 11 going to that Tulsa game.
And they were up 18 in that game. They were up 18. They were up 23-5 against Tulsa. I don't think anybody was thinking in the second quarter, hey, this season's going to be a 6-4 year. So talk about what ifs. What if, you show up in the second half against Tulsa? What if a kick is made in the Memphis game? It's kind of a peculiar football season. I want to point out a couple of positives on the court stuff, or on the field, however you want to phrase it. There was a national championship won this year by a UCF team. That was cheerleading.
Yeah.
In January, and they're going to. I'm assuming they're a month away from defending their title. But after what was it, 7 years, 13? What was the last time, Jeff? It was I think
it was 2014. I want to say so. It's about a 6-year.
I think it was 2007.
Oh, you might be right. Yeah, 2007. Yeah. So a 13-year absence.
So, to me, they're probably the team of the year, just because if we did those type of awards, because they did win a national title for Coach Gooch and company there. That was tremendous. Also, we saw, in my opinion, in her last year, maybe arguably the greatest women's basketball player in the history of the program, in KK Wright. Play her last year, unfortunately, ended in a semifinal loss against Cincinnati. We'll never know. You talk about what ifs. What if? Would they have made the tournament? Would they have been a WNIT team? We'll never know, because obviously none of that happened. But what we do know is we probably saw, and I ranked her in my UCF 250 series as the greatest women's basketball player of all time, and so many great moments for her. So a salute to her and her tremendous career that unfortunately came to an end the way it did. Probably deserved better than that, but that's just the way it goes. But to salute to her, and salute to some of the baseball guys that did not return. You mentioned Jeff Hankinson got drafted by the Rays. The way the Rays are going right now, he could be on opening day lineup after they get rid of everybody else they trade before the opening day of the season. But also Trevor Holloway, right? Murph had a monster year going on as a starter, and he ended up signing with the Yankees. So a salute to him and his great run among some of the other guys on that team.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Trevor Holloway was a guy who always had the potential, but didn't really have a refined control. And then this year he found the control, and with it became a dominating strikeout pitcher. Really just missed a ton of bats, didn't give a lot of free passes, and that's what got him drafted by the Yankees. So yeah, again, just another reason why this baseball season, oh man, it hurts. It hurts.
But another UCF alum, Chad Mottola, hitting coach for the Rays, got to the World Series, couple games away from a title, but still won the American League title. So there you had a UCF representing in the World Series in the dugout this year. At Taco Fall, Taco in the bubble with the Boston Celtics in the NBA playoffs as well. So we had UCF.
It was kind of a star of the bubble too, right? I mean, people were
the
following
videos.
him around,
yeah, he was kind of golfing and swimming. I mean, he's got his own podcast now.
Wait, Taco has his own podcast? I'm not aware of this.
Yes, him and Grant Williams do a podcast.
Oh boy,
you want to be on? I know. We got to get you on that.
I already subscribed to too many podcasts. I guess one more is okay.
Yeah. By the way, quick note for you, Eric. The UCA and UDA College Cheerleading and Dance Team National Championships have been postponed to April 27th and 28th of 2001. Usually they're in usually they're in January, but
wow, we got a lot. Holy smokes,
back to April
could be really wild.
Yeah,
that's good. Hopefully they'll have an opportunity to defend their title there. So that was kind of unique there from a UCF alum standpoint. I remember, it got to a point in that summer, right, where Cal Bloom making a SmackDown debut, former UCF tight end, was like that. We were writing about that. That's what
right. I know.
Another positive for UCF football, they're not going to lose their bowl game as badly as Florida is losing their bowl game.
Oh! Yeah, it's not a good year for the state of Florida.
Yeah, it's been a rough year.
Bowl games, but so those are some of the moments I think from 2020 that stands out, and obviously many questions going into 2021.
Yeah, there are a lot of questions, and we're going to get a lot of them answered hopefully soon, one way or the other. But this is going to be a big year transition for 2021 for not just UCF football, but I think for a lot of UCF programs in general. As we say, how do you weather this season, especially for example, volleyball, who just released their schedule, which we'll talk about in a little bit. How do they weather this bizarre schedule that we're going to be seeing with a lot of the fall sports in the spring? How does UCF handle hosting all these events? How do all the other teams in the American handle hosting all these events when they get the chance?
How are we going to get used to seeing Mackenzie Milton and Garnet in goal?
We're not. I know that much.
That's the other.
That's probably the most. That's probably the one thing for sure we know about 2021 is we are not going to be used to seeing that.
No, but I'll tell you what. Probably the most memorable classy transfer with the video, right? Like that's not going to be forgotten.
The school made a production out of it.
Yeah.
And did so on very short notice, reportedly, too, from what I understand.
Yeah.
So I think that's something that people will remember in 2020 and they'll think about and what's going to be unique in 2021 when you see him in Garnet and Gold. And we mentioned this on the night shift I talked with Murph and Andrew. What your thought? You could have in 2021 Mackenzie Milton starting at Florida State and Daryl Mack starting at Old Dominion at the same time.
And Dylan Gabriel starting at UCF. How about that?
Yeah.
Well, and then you have Noah Vedral up at Rutgers.
Yeah.
Don't sleep on Noah Vedral with the Scarlet Knights, my friends.
Greg
Oh no,
Schiano
he had an outstanding year for all things considered up there.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this. Let me ask you boys this question. If you had to predict for 20, which of those quarterbacks would you pick right now to have the best year of the group? In whatever subjective way you describe it. Like, I mean, obviously Milton's the story everybody's going to focus on, the comeback just being on the field.
Yeah.
But I am fascinated, just putting that aside. I mean, that each individual has their own unique story.
Well, wins and losses strictly, that answer is pretty easy. I think it's going to be Dylan Gabriel.
Yeah, I agree.
ODU by not having a season really pushes them back in a momentum standpoint from other schools in Conference USA. They're the only ones not to play. Rutgers always has an uphill battle in the Big Ten East. Enough said. And Florida State has so many holes that have to be worked on. I don't know if Mackenzie Milton can fix that.
If we're just talking about statistics, because again, the best year would belong to Mackenzie as soon as he takes the snap. But if we're just talking about statistics, I'm intrigued to see what Daryl Mack can do in Conference USA.
Yeah.
He's kind of the sleeper pick, isn't he?
I mean, because again, he's not a polished quarterback by any sense. Like, people were asking me, like, why is he going to such a small school? Like, well, he's never been a great quarterback. He's never really shown great touch on balls, great accuracy. As a passer, he has a ton to work on, where Mackenzie or Dylan Gabriel is far much more advanced. But in that league, with his athleticism, his size, he could be an absolute terror and a real tough guy to handle running a bunch of read option. And I'm kind of intrigued to see that, because he could statistically put up some huge numbers in that conference.
And by the way, I'm looking at their schedule. By the way, they're not ducking people in the non-conference. They're scheduled to open the season at Wake Forest September 4th. Then they're scheduled to go to Liberty September 18th and host Buffalo September 25th. Those are three bowl teams.
I don't think they expected that to play out the way they did when they scheduled those.
No, I guarantee you they did not. No, they didn't. So he's going to be, I mean, some of those games might get televised. He might get some exposure there, whether it be, there. And I'm with you, Murph. I think Max the sleeper here. Oh, by the way, I could see it now where each week we're doing a show. It's like, oh, by the way, wow, did you see Daryl Mack, what he just did? Oh, yeah, really? Yeah, wow. Yeah, reminded me of that.
We're gonna be on UCF quarterback watch here.
Hey, man.
It'll be
busy Saturdays.
You're right.
It's that's a good transfer, Daryl. So I'm very fascinated to see how those guys do, and that's going to be something that people kind of get accustomed to, seeing those box scores.
Yeah,
he definitely has a very easy path to starting. If you look at those 19, numbers, they're not impressive. That was a bad team. So I mean, the opportunity is certainly there for him to step in and take charge of that team. But Murph's right. He's not an accurate quarterback. He's basically a 50% quarterback.
Right.
And
for his career, he's 51 of 100 passing.
Yeah, and in Conference USA, that can work for you, because you're dealing with a different talent set. In the American, it wasn't going to work. That's why Brandon Wimbush didn't last very long, because he had the same accuracy problems that Mac had coming in. I remember when I wrote a comparison piece between the two for another site shortly after the transfer, and I basically blasted the Wimbush transfer, saying UCF doesn't need him. They already have one.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I'm really going to be intrigued by seeing what Daryl does in Conference USA, but I think I have to agree with Murph also that the second Mackenzie Milton takes a snap for Florida State, that's kind of the emotional winner.
And that would be potentially, if the schedule stay on track and he wins the job, would be Sunday night on Labor Day weekend. Florida State is scheduled to host Notre Dame.
So in Tallahassee.
Yep.
No doubt a national TV game.
That is going to be a big televised. It'll probably be an ABC Sunday night game. There will be a lot of attention there. That's going to be emotional. It's going to be a huge moment if he wins the job, and I think he will. That's going to be a significant moment for a lot of people. Media that's covered the story. There's going to be a lot of story angles, and it's going to be weird from a UCF fan perspective, because I think there's going to be a lot of happiness for him, But there's going to be a lot of them that's going to feel a little anguish because Florida State's going to get all the attention with him and not UCF. So it's going to be unique. It's going to be a unique, surreal week if that were to play out.
Not only that, Eric, but Florida State's going to get the credit for in perpetuity.
Correct.
You go forward, it'll always be, you go to his profile on ESPN, as if he gets in the NFL, what school did he come from? It's always going to say Florida State.
Correct. Just like Ja'Eric King with Miami.
Yeah.
And we've seen that with other sports, and we've had this conversation because I remember we got into this.
Jalen Hurts.
Jalen Hurts. The Graham brothers. Remember we had this debate when Taco made the conference final. Well, does Joey Graham count as a UCF alum? Well, no, because he left and he went to Oklahoma State and things like that. Now, the difference is Mackenzie did graduate from UCF, so he is a graduate. But, yeah, you're right. I mean, Drew, you're right. I mean, it's going to be – I think the first couple of weeks they'll mention UCF, but I think a lot of people will probably mention Florida State. And I personally could care less about those things. I just want everybody to do well. And I think hopefully I would like to think that fans deep down at the end of the day, a kid like Murph has said it before in previous podcasts, he literally almost gave his leg for the program. So you know what? I don't. George O'Leary said this once at a UCF rally, and I don't. It's like it's okay to be Seminole Knights. It's okay to be Seminole Knights for a year.
Can't believe he said that.
He did. I don't know why.
Anyway, all right. Well, listen. Here's hoping that 2021 is much better than 2020 for everybody, and continue to stay safe. We're still working through this whole thing, but the only way we can get through it is everybody doing their part. So, and
are we not going to talk about are we taking a break?
Yeah, we're going to.
Are we ending the show?
Yes, we are going to take a break.
I mean, it's not like Jeff was wrapping it up.
No. I'm just wrapping up this segment because in our next segment, Murph, this gives me the opportunity to tease. Real quick, we'll talk about the declarations for the NFL from football. The volleyball schedule is out. Our first spring schedule is out. We'll talk about that real quick. And Murph, you'll get to riff on the baseball all-conference selections that came out today.
Baseball, Murph! More baseball!
I wasn't going to leave you. I wasn't going to leave you hanging, Brian. Don't worry. Stick around. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back to the show. Jeff, Eric, Brian, and Drew with you here on this evening, Wednesday, December 30th, as we wrap up the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast for the year 2020. Just three quick little news items before we get going. First of all, we had a flurry, like we mentioned in the previous segment, of declarations for the NFL draft. Murph, some of them were a surprise, but maybe one of them was a surprise, but actually maybe not that much of a surprise, in particular with the three big ones, right?
No, they were surprised. Well, maybe not, but one was. Well, he wasn't.
Maybe, I don't know. Was it? I'm asking you.
No, not really.
Okay.
So, yeah, for those who have, I guess, not seen the news over the past 36 hours, Trey Nixon, Greg McCrae, and Jacob Harris have all declared their intentions to go pro. I don't have a lot to say here, and because I feel like a lot of times people want to debate whether or not a player has made a good decision or the right decision to go pro when they're not like an obvious first-round pick. And I have come to, I think, learn and mature into the opinion of it doesn't matter to us to make that call.
You're right.
Because it's not our life. And this is not about just like football. Like for guys like Jacob Harris, who've been in college for 6 years, I don't think this is about like, oh, he must does he think he's going to be like a first round pick? I guarantee not. But there's so much more than this about, maybe he wants to go just be a professional now in any walk of life, or not be in college for another year, or just take, maybe have a chance to take care of his family. There might be other personal issues we don't know about in any player in any sport. And so I find a lot of the discourse around whether or not the player's making the right decision to be really self-centered and selfish. And
he turned on us, Murph. Boo!
This is why I'll never host a punditry show on ESPN called Second Take, because I don't do that crap. But I'm happy for all these guys.
It's because we're all second rate.
I just wish them well, and they've done so much for this program already. And I hope people who are questioning any decisions, especially because people I think thought that like there's a chance that Trey Nixon may come back or Jacob Harris may come back. If you're questioning their decision, understand that I'm sure they didn't make these choices on a whim, and there's a lot that goes into these decisions beyond just football. This is a life decision. This is now basically you are moving on into the next stage of your life from an amateur to a professional, and whatever that is. And that's a big life decision. And so I think it's unfair for anybody to criticize that, but of course there will be people who do.
Well, I mean, you're 100% right. It is their decision. I wish we always, as is always the case with these things, I just wish we knew more from the players themselves as to what really went into it, what things were they. And a lot
really
of those things.
Simple. I want to make money now. If I'm going to get tackled, I want to make money for it.
Yeah, well, of course, right? But like, they are understanding. They're also trying to factor in, where they believe they might fall in. What are their odds of getting a professional contract next year? And I mean, that has to factor into it somewhat. And obviously, obviously it's the answer is greater than zero. But to what extent did they have they considered that, and who is advising them on that, and what information that they have at their disposal? That because I wish we had more insight into that. As a fan,
I think Brian just did though for you. I thought he made. I'm glad Brian has made the best point on Jacob Harris that I've heard since this came out, because people are like, well, what is he doing? He's got to work on his craft, and he's got to learn how to catch. Brian just brought it up. He's been 6 years, man. 6 years.
Yeah.
Like, it's time. Like, at some point, you just kind of want to move on. And your stock is not going. And I think people have this idea that just because you come back. First of all these guys are seniors. I'm assuming they have all of them, most of them, if not all of them, have their degrees. And they probably want to move on and either try to make it out to the NFL. And yeah, you know what? Their stock's not going to improve by coming back another year. Not in Jacob Harris's deal, because he's been here a while. And yeah, he could learn how to catch. He's got to prove to them when he does combines that he can catch and all the flaws. That's what it comes down to. It's not playing an extra year. So I think all these guys are making the right moves. Greg McCray, running backs especially, like, try to get paid now, man, because you got a shelf life as a running back. And we've seen this with my beloved Dolphins with Myles Gaskin from Washington. He went undrafted. So, running backs, you guys he'll have opportunities. He's just got to be in the right situation and things like that. But I don't understand why people are like, I can't believe they left. Like, yeah, what do you mean you can't believe it? They're seniors. Like,
people look at these things through two lenses: one, football only, and right. Two, homerism. People don't consider football players or any athletes really to be human in general. So we don't consider life decisions. We consider them to be football decisions. I would say this. If Jacob Harris never signs on with a football team this next year or never plays it down in the NFL, that does not make this the wrong decision. Right. This is his decision to make in this time. And this is not – I guarantee this cannot all be about football. This is about where he wants to take his life step next. Yeah. This isn't about, like, I think I'm going to go play in the NFL tomorrow. This is about my life. What do I want to do with my life? And that is his decision. And to kind of answer Jeff's question about, I wish we knew this, you are not deserving of that. We don't.
I get it. I wish, like everyone, I'm curious. I wish.
But you could never know everything that goes into every decision these kids make. Right. But that would be really intrusive.
It would be, yeah. What can I say? I'm that curious. I'm like, yeah. I don't mind being intrusive and asking.
Well, here's the bigger question is, like I said, and again, they're seniors, and I think people have this wrong idea just because they got an extra year to play with. Not a lot of seniors are going to take advantage of that. They're not. That's actually an improper way of describing it. It's not taking advantage. It's like they're not going to take that opportunity. Because a lot of them want to move on, either play in the NFL or move on, like Murph said, with their life and do other things. Like, I don't know if people realize this, but football hurts. Like, it hurts. It hurts. It's a violent sport. and some people like kind of get tired of playing it for free. So, that's why I don't have an issue with guys opting out of bowl games. Like, people are making this big deal about all these Florida guys opting out. I applaud it. I applaud all the UCF guys that opted out. I would have opted out too. And I think players have finally smartened up to that and are smart in the realizing, hey, I've got some control in what I can do here because, hey, if you're not compensating me, that's fine. But I'm going to, do what's best for me and my situation and my family. And if that means I got to opt out of a bowl game or, go pro, then so be it. And I applaud that.
Yeah. Well, we're, nonetheless, it's going to be sad to not see those guys in the UCF uniform anymore. Greedily as a fan, I'm sure some fans out there are like, if only we could have one more year with him. But you know what? Well, I'm Murph. You've convinced me. You're absolutely right.
I think the bigger question with beyond these guys moving out, guys, is going to be next year. And I think it speaks to why I think some people are disappointed about this season at 6-4 is because you lost a lot of personnel from this roster. And you're going to be pretty young next year. And I think there are legitimate questions in certain positions. And you wonder if, dare I say the word, rebuilding is in store here for this team in 2021.
Oh, my God, he's using the R word, Murph.
I mean, I'm sorry, Murph. Maybe I'm wrong, but Jim Thorpe finalists don't grow out a tree in like that quickly. I could be wrong.
No, I agree, and certainly with the players who are no longer here, especially the running back room and the wide receiver room, like this team's going to need to really find out and replace some big time contributors, and that's before we get to are they going to make big strides in the defensive backfield? Who's going to step up at safety positions? Obviously, there are guys that are there, but I mean, to replace a guy like Richie Grant or Aaron Robinson, that's a tall order. But and I was talking last night to some guys because I was at the Cheez-It Bowl talking to some people about UCF, and there's a lot of attrition here on this offense. You got Jalen Robinson, Ryan O'Keefe. Ja'Kias Cradle, but like I don't know, Cradle didn't do a ton this year, and otherwise, how do you replace Marlon Williams, Trey Nixon, and Jacob Harris in 1 year? How do you replace Otis Anderson and Greg McCray in 1 year? I mean, now you've got Batavius Thompson, who's sort of more been a change of pace back at UCF, and then Demarius Good, Johnny Richardson, R.J. Harvey, like. There's a lot to be proven there. I mean, I'm sure we'll be writing some preseason articles about what needs to be proven offensively for UCF, and we haven't had to write those articles for about 3 years now.
Right.
Yeah. You know what the hard part is about
transfer portal. Transfer portal will probably be in play for some of this.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
And the hard part about that, also for is we don't know what we're going to have in terms of a spring season at all for football, which is usually when you would get the when these guys would get the opportunity to get used to the system, to figure out what their roles are, where the coaches would get to evaluate them and see what they have, and who knows how much summer we're going to have too if things continue to roll on as they are so far with COVID-19. I mean, hopefully, we'll get some, the vaccines, and it will help to alleviate that over time. But this is a large country, and it's gonna take a team effort by everybody to kind of get us to the point where
it's
we
all
might have
the coaching
we don't know.
staff's fault. Boo! It's the coaching staff's fault. Fire them all. Come on, get the vaccine going, coaches.
Like it's in their hands. I mean, we just don't know. It's
like that. You didn't like that impression, Murph? That was my weekly impression.
Oh, I know. The troll voice. I do.
The troll voice had to make its appearance at least once. So
the troll voice is more like droopy dog. Ooh, boo, boo, boo. I was more looking forward to that than your. That sounded more like upset Eric. That sounded more like upset Eric.
So, but
I'm more upset that you mentioned Cheez-It Bowl Tuesday night. I mean, how many Cheez-It boxes you get hooked up to in that?
I did take home my complimentary Cheez-It box. I don't know if I should open it because it is a commemorative Cheez-It Bowl box of Cheez-Its. I feel like I could sell that on eBay for a solid $2.50.
Murph was the Cheez-It Bowl trophy a giant metallic Cheez-It, or was it a bowl of Cheez-Its?
So I don't know the trophy. But you saw what happened to Mike Gundy after the game, right?
Yeah, he got the Cheez-Its dumped on him, and that was fantastic.
Exactly. He got the Cheez-Its bat, which
great.
really made us upset when they didn't dump the Wisconsin coach in a vat of mayo earlier today.
That would have
So,
no, but they did break the trophy. Did you see that?
So, Jeff, I'm looking at the trophy. It's got the basic, like, silver metallic trophy base. And then on top of it, where, like, a crystal ball would sit, it's just a big glass bowl of Cheez-Its.
Yes. That's what I was hoping for.
And the players are around it, and they're cramming their faces with Cheez-Its.
Which they have every right to do when you win the Cheez-It Bowl. Yes. Oh, give me some of that. By the way, I love the Cheez-It Bowl for just leaning into that. It's great. God bless them. They're the most self-aware bowl people in the world. Thank God they're in Orlando. All right.
Well, there you go. But there you go. That's. But we'll finish on this. You saw De'Ara King in person get injured. He was going to come back. So for all the fans that complain why a guy's leaving, guys can take it injured. So just keep that in mind. I don't hear fans saying, "Oh man, that stinks, man. You got hurt." Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I wonder now if does De'Ara King actually change his mind,
right?
And then, like, how do the fans react to that? Again, we shouldn't care how fans react. It's not their decision, but I'm sure tons will be like, but you said you were coming back. And it's like,
come on, dress it up.
What about school loyalty? Get the hell out of here.
Well, right. I mean, what's wrong with saying, I changed my mind?
Circumstances happen. My knee is
Stuff happened.
Sorry. Jeff, that's flip-flop, Jeff. You can't flip-flop.
He's not running for office. Anyway, couple more stories that we wanted to go over real quick. Volleyball schedule came out. First spring sport to drop their schedule is volleyball. Really interesting format that they're playing. So UCF begins their season. It's 13th under Todd Dagenais, by the way. The season will start with, I had the schedule, here it is. Oh yeah, January 22nd, they actually have an exhibition match against FAU at the venue, and then the following day, they actually have the regular season opener. That one actually counts against FAU. The schedule is 16 matches, 11 of them at home, and the way they're working it in the American is they split the American into two divisions, and you play each team in your division twice, and it's a back-to-back. So, for example, UCF has 2 matches against Tulane, February 5th and 6th at home. 2 matches at Temple, February 18th and 19th. 2 matches against ECU, March 5th and March 6th at home. They're at Cincinnati for a pair, and then they have South Florida at home for a pair. Non-conference, UCF has FAU, Stetson at home, 2 against UNF at home, and then I think this is interesting. February 26th, Friday, home from Miami, and then at Miami the following Sunday on February 28th. And then after those 16 matches, it's off to the American Athletic Conference Tournament in Cincinnati, where it will be a 4-team tournament on April 2nd and 3rd, and then the NCAA tournament first round begins April 9th. So this is going to be a Naruto run to the finish in volleyball. Eric, I'm sure you've taken a look at this schedule. This is pretty wild, and it's interesting to see the American split itself into basically, you could say 2 divisions, but really it's 2 sub conferences because you're not playing anyone from the other side, right?
Yeah, I mean, fingers crossed, right? As we've learned in 2020, subject to change.
Yeah,
and literally 3 hours before tip-off, we've learned that could happen. That's kind of the interesting thing that strikes me is what happens if you can't make up the games. I'm trying to figure out where if they have the room to make up those games, or do you think they would just go based by win percentage at that point? The way they've scheduled this, that's the thing that kind of strikes me. I mean, I guess there is some weekends there, like UCF, for example, has a weekend on the 19th open in between the trip at Cincinnati and hosting South Florida. So maybe there's some pocket spots, but man, I hope for the best. I hope it works out from that standpoint. And then, it's kind of unique because if I'm not mistaken, we're going to have 2 volleyball seasons in one calendar year, right? Like it's just so wild.
That's why it's so short too. Is you can't
and
really.
I applaud that, right? The health of the players, and the one I'm the happiest for is a McKenna Melville, because I think one of the things that was my question in what the future was going to be with the fall schedule with volleyball and things was how many matches would she get to play, because she's on track through her first 2 years to break the Kills career record and potentially be the first ever 4-time All-American in program history. At least now she might have a shot with this. They're going to be the favorites. The trip at Cincinnati, playing Friday, Saturday, that's big. Cincinnati, obviously Jordan Thompson has graduated. But that's still
Thank God. Love you, Jordan, but we're glad you're gone.
Right. But that's going to be tough at Temple, back-to-back Thursday, Friday with Temple, too, by the way. Well, I don't know if you noticed that. Kind of a short week. You've got – now, the Tulane 2 matches is not conference, by the way. It's kind of unique. It's basically both teams wanted to find games, and they just decided to play each other, even though they're both conference teams, and it's not a conference games. In that regard, but I do like their schedule from the standpoint. You look at their road trips at Temple, at Cincinnati.
The one match at Miami.
Yeah, but like from a conference standpoint, you've got South Florida at home to finish, at Cincinnati. It's going to probably come down to that, but they're going to be eager to play, right? You got to think these players have been practicing in the fall. They're eager to get out there. And hope for the best for them, man. Hope for the best for all of them.
It's a race to the finish. By the way, good job by Todd of staying in state too with the non-conference, right? Because
yeah.
Now we're lucky in that here in Florida you have so many programs where you can do that.
Miami's good. Like that's a good home and home to get with Miami. Do you think? Let me ask you this: could you see? And I'm sure we'll have Todd on at some point. I am curious. Could you see? In future schedules, a little bit more of this, sometimes, you take some positives of a bad situation and, you might, hey, you know what? It's not a bad idea. Maybe we see some home and homes with a Miami like in future schedules and things like that. Could you see more of that in volleyball?
Well, they've done that before with having home and homes with non-conference in the season. In fact, was it the year that we hosted in the NCAA, Florida Gulf Coast actually did have a home and home with us. In the non-conference schedule, you had one weekend where UCF played in a tournament down in Fort Myers, and then I think the following weekend UCF played them in a tournament up here. But as far as the format of the schedule itself, where you're playing 2 matches in one setting on back-to-back days, I think that's very much a one-off thing. It's and especially because remember. This is what's odd about this, and why I was really intrigued by this is that the east and west sides are uneven because UConn is gone, right? UConn would be in UCF's side in UCF's division, but since they've obviously left for the Big East, UCF the teams in the east side of the American play one fewer opponent than the teams on the west side. So that actually turns out to be an advantage for UCF, Cincinnati, and whoever comes out to be the contender, the contenders from the East, because they'll be fresher heading into the American Athletic Conference tournament, having played one fewer weekend. So,
right. And the other weird thing about this, the Miami home and home. Keep in mind this: Miami played in the fall. The ACC played in the fall, like the SEC did. Miami went 5-3. In the fall. So you're going to, in that situation, it's kind of unique because Miami already played in the fall.
Yeah.
Meaning, and
basically they're going to be playing a few warm-up matches prior to getting ready for the, do they play in the NCAA tournament? Like that's an open question.
Well, and I guarantee you probably the reason why Miami agreed and UCF agreed to play each other's, they both realized this. They both kind of need that game potentially. You don't know. Like if you're Miami, you probably if you beat a good UCF team that could be potentially a top 25, that helps your resume. And if you're Todd, that helps your resume. So that could be a scenario where that could be a big factor. Especially remember the field this year in volleyball will be 48, not 64.
Right. Good point. So. So again, that first home match, regular season home match, January 23rd. That's a Saturday, 1 p.m. against FAU. The two teams play an exhibition match the day before, Friday, January 22nd, at 1 p.m. at the venue. Last but not least, Murph, baseball news.
Let's go.
Preseason all-conference selections here. UCF Baseball getting ready to start. Look at this.
Preseason picks.
Preseason all-conference picks. Jackson Clare and Colton Gordon are the first guys to pull in some preseason hardware. They have both been named to the AAC's preseason all-conference team. You talked about that pitching staff from last year. Well, these are a couple guys who are, or at least one guy who's back in action here, right?
Well, both. Certainly.
They're both, yeah.
On the starting rotation, Colton Gordon is presumably this team's Friday night starter once again. He was the Friday night starter in 2020, and was the innings leader guy. 23 innings, most on the staff, 2.35 ERA, and then Jackson Clare looks like the natural follower in the footsteps of Jeffrey Hickinson. Absolutely dominant last year out of the pen, striking out 20 and 13.1 innings of work, 1.35 ERA. In that time. So, yeah, you probably got UCF's Friday night starter and their closer on the preseason all-conference team. UCF ranked second with the second most points in the preseason conference poll, only behind ECU, who is the preseason conference favorite for the third time in 5 years. ECU garnered every single first-place vote from the league coaches, except obviously of that of Cliff Godwin, because you can vote for your own team. So which team did Cliff Godwin vote for? It wasn't second place UCF. It was third place Tulane.
Come on, Cliff. I ranked you in my top 20 assistant coaches of all time at UCF, and that's how you repay us? Boo. Come on.
And then bringing up the bottom of the poll is USF.
It's surprising to see them at the bottom.
Well, they had a tough year last year, and remember, they've been in kind of in a transition period over there. Jeff, you've gotten to call Hunter Goodman, who's the preseason player of the year, the catcher from Memphis. He's just a sophomore, so maybe you didn't get to call his games. But
no, we saw him a couple years ago. Boy, that kid can hit. Oh boy, he is the real deal.
Yeah,
and he probably, I think he was in the run. Murph, you would say, I thought he was well on his way to being the conference player of the year last year.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if we see anything like what we saw in last year's abbreviated season, boy, he's going to be a terror out there for Memphis. He could single-handedly, it's been a tough stretch for Memphis. They finished 6th in the league last year at 10-7, but they could finally be a competitor based on him.
Goodman had 8 home runs in 17 games.
I mean, my God, really?
Oh.
Yeah.
Is there anybody? It's going to be the league is stacked. I think it's going to be a top 5 RPI league again,
even without UConn, which is
correct.
Amazing when you think about it. How really good. I don't want to say dominant. I think that's too strong of a word, but how excellent UConn has been year in and year out in this league, and they're gone now, and this is going to be a really tough league once again.
Always.
18 league. I mean, Jake Kuchminer back with ECU pitcher. He wasn't even the preseason pitcher of the year. Actually, I would have gone with him, but they went with Brayton Olhoff of Tulane. Is there anybody on the UCF roster, Murph, that you thought, hey, should have been considered on the all-conference? You think they got it right?
Yeah, I would say they got it right. UCF had some nice players. But, I think they got it right on the pitching side. Those are the two obvious guys pitching-wise you would take. Hitting, their best players are probably Jeffrey Pena and Pablo Ruiz, but it's hard to say, and Dalton Lingo as well. But it's hard to say they deserve a spot. Again, I'm not sure. It's amazing to me that Jake Kuchmaner is still. It feels like he's been in college forever.
Yeah,
he threw a perfect game in March of 2019, and I thought was he a freshman then, or it was. It just feels like one of those guys who should be gone by now.
By the way, Jake Kuchmaner, the younger brother of former UCF volleyball libero Mackenzie Kuchmaner.
Whoa! Oh,
So-
look at these storylines. Hello.
So, yeah.
Murph, get to the bottom of that when they play ECU. Right there. Get to the bottom of that. There's your angle right there. Holy smokes.
You know, I never made that drive from Columbia, South Carolina to Greenville, North Carolina. Maybe I'll do it.
That's going to be an interesting question you bring up. I'm curious how the conference schedule will look. There's been obviously reports, Kendall Rogers reporting that it's probably going to be a 4-game series. We talked about that last week. I know that. But, 4-game series in the American, man. Remember, we used to talk about Sundays being pivotal, winning series 2 out of 3. Man, now you're thinking you win 3 out of 4, you're golden. But split 2 for 4 ain't the worst thing in the world, especially if you're on the road. I mean, it's gonna be wild. I think it's gonna be a wild year in baseball with a 4-game series. I mean, it's hard enough to beat a team 3 out of 4 or even sweep. I mean, imagine if you get swept on a 4-game series in the hole you're digging yourself into there.
Oh, Murph, you still there? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's gonna be rough. I was waiting for Jeff because Jeff had the disgusted grunt there.
Yeah, I know.
Well, you know what? Well, the reason Jeff's disgusted is, the uncertainty whether he's going to be in Clearwater for a baseball tournament this year or not. We don't know.
Well, I'm hoping so. Listen, if Memphis gets in, we'll see Hunter Goodman. That's going to be fun. I really missed being in Clearwater last year. I really did. That's the one thing. Of all the things that I missed, that was probably the one thing I missed the most. Because that was going to be a great tournament, no doubt about it. So yeah. But hey, we've got our preseason selections. With the season, do we have a idea of when exactly the season might start, Murph?
February 19th.
February 19th. All right, so right after Valentine's
Fingers
Day.
crossed.
Yep, subject to change, as is everything. So, all right.
I just hope, man. I'm worried. I'm worried that Murph is going to show up to the ballpark like 3 hours early, and somebody's going to reach out to him and say, "Hey, man, game's off, and you got to go." And Murph's like, "I'm not leaving. I ain't leaving." Like Leo DiCaprio in that movie. Where am I going anywhere?
I'm not going anywhere.
I waited too long for baseball.
That's going to be too much.
Someone give me a glove. I'm going to play 9 positions.
Damn it.
Either that or a tent.
That's right. I'm
and a
waiting.
propane tank.
That's right. Murph's going to be yelling, "I need this." Haven't you seen Major League Baseball? Nothing's going on except San Diego Padres are grabbing everybody. Everybody else is fire sale. I don't know if we're going to get a full baseball season. Damn it. Let me stay.
Right.
I'm staying.
Oh.
Gosh.
Anyway.
All right. Well, you know what? I wish we could stay, but we got to go. How about that for a segue? All right. So Drew had to dip out a little bit early, but I want to thank Drew for coming on board. You can follow him at StatBoyDrew on Twitter. You can follow Eric at Eric Lopez Elo, and of course Brian at Spokes_Murphy, and you can follow me at Jeff_Sharon. Follow us collectively at UCF_Banneret, where we will continue to have coverage of UCF football's offseason, and of course UCF men's and women's basketball as we roll on into the new year in 2021. Get started here in just a couple of days, and it'll be a busy spring, we know that, but we'll have it all for you here on the Black and Gold Banneret. Don't forget to follow also Jeremy Brenner, Danny Medina, for all the latest as well, including Jeremy's amazing newsletter, which he puts together every weekday for us, which we really, really appreciate. Make sure you follow him for that. So much good content that's still coming out even though football season is over, and we're glad to share it with you here as we have all throughout 2020 and for the last almost 5 years here on Black and Gold Banneret. It's been a real blast. So for Eric and Drew and Brian, I'm Jeff saying thank you so much for listening. Please continue to stay safe out there, and Happy New Year. This has been the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. We will catch you in 2021.